The meeting is now called to order. First order of the day, let me acknowledge the presence of virtually present Senator Coco Pimentel, Senator Amy Marcos, and Senator Mark Villar. The chair therefore declares the presence of quorum. Thank you, my dear colleagues, for joining us today. With that, the chair declares the presence of quorum. May I now call the committee secretary to acknowledge our guests and resource persons. Comsec Grace, are you here? Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Joining us for today's public hearing are as follows. From the Department of Energy, we have Secretary Rafael Lutilla. From the Energy Regulatory Commission, we have Attorney Mona Lisa de Malanta, the chairperson. Commissioner Marco Romeo Fuentes. From the National Power Corporation, we have Mr. Melchor Dulme, the officer in charge. From the Independent Electricity Market Operator of the Philippines, IMOP, we have Attorney Richard Nethercott, the President and CEO, with Engineer Edward Olmedo, Engineer Arjon Valencia, and Attorney Lilibeth Grace Vetus. From the Manila Electric Company, Meralco, we have Mr. Ray Espinosa, the President and CEO, with Attorney Ronald Valles. From the San Miguel Global Power Holdings Incorporated, we have Mr. Jupiter Cabagio. From the Aboitiz Power Corporation, we have Mr. Emmanuel Rubio, the President and CEO. From the Philippine Rural Electric Cooperatives Association, PhilReca, we have Attorney Janine Colingan, the Executive Director, with Engineer Rene Pahilagutan. From the National Association of General Managers of Electric Cooperatives, NAGMEC, we have Mr. Alan Laniba, the President. From the Occidental Mindoro Consolidated Power Corporation, OMCPC, we have Mr. Calvin Luther Henotiva, the Chief Operations Officer. From the Oriental Mindoro Electric Cooperative, or MECO, we have Mr. Teodoro de la Cruz, Engineer, and Engineer Humphrey Dolor. From the Delta Power, we have Mr. Joseph Lua, Arthur Kent Holt, and Mr. Mark Pia. From the Developers of Renewable Energy for Advancement Incorporated, DREAM, Attorney J. Layug, the President. From the Management Association of the Philippines, we have Mr. Ernesto Pantanco. From the City Government of Puerto Princesa, we have Councilor Elgin Robert Damasco. From Power for People Coalition, we have Attorney Avril de Torres. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's public hearing. For our discussion, we'll be discussing the persistent power outages that our country has been experiencing. In this regard, COMSEC, kindly read the measures that we will be addressing today.
The agenda for this morning's public hearing are as follows. Senate Resolution number 107, or a resolution directing the Senate Committee on Energy to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the persistent and recurring power outages and rotational blackouts in the different parts of the country and on the rising costs of electricity amid these power interruptions. Senate Resolution number 32, or a resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recurrent brownouts experienced by Occidental Mindoro electric consumers. Senate Resolution number 39, or a resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the quality of electric power service in the province of Palawan with the end in view of protecting the interests of Palawenos. Senate Resolution number 47, or a resolution directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the plans of the Department of Energy to provide long-term solutions to power supply shortages with the end in view of ensuring the quality, reliability, security, and affordability of electric power supply in the country. And the privileged speech of Senate President Juan Miguel Migz Zubiri on the high cost of electricity delivered on August 8, 2022. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Comsec. Salamat po sa inyong pagdalo ngayong umagang ito. Alam naman po natin na matagal nang hinaing ng ating mga kababayan, lalong-lalo na po yung mga nasa probinsya, ang malawakang suliranin na brownout na lalong pinalalala ng mas mataas na presyo ng kuryente. Even before I was elected as a senator, I have already been receiving numerous complaints regarding the persistent and recurring power outages, coupled with high electricity rates that had been adversely affecting the economic activities and livelihood of the people in these areas. We are familiar that the energy industry is divided into several sectors, namely generation, transmission, and distribution. Even though they are distinct and separate industries, each one's problem affects the others. Therefore, as a result, rather than applying a band-aid fix, we are here to discuss and discover a systematic solution to this problem. In accordance with this, we've invited several stakeholders from the different energy sectors to shed light on the problems and issues they are facing which contribute to these power outages and expensive electricity. Moreover, we have also invited our regulators to aid us in addressing and resolving these issues. Before we go into the issue of brownouts and high cost of electricity, let us first find out if we do have enough supply to meet our energy demands from the Department of Energy. And that would be Secretary Rutilla. Good morning to you, Secretary Rutilla, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the Senate Committee on Energy. I just would like to make a short presentation to introduce the issues that you have directed the committee to take a look into. We are happy to have received the proposed proposed Senate resolutions.
Go ahead,
And
Secretary Rutilla.
very quickly, I just wanted to point out that that the most expensive power is no power. And I think you fully agree, Mr. Chairman and senators, that we have to protect the availability of supply. When in previous presentations, I did inform the committee that the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. The imported component of our power generation mix is more than 54%. And therefore, this is also reflected in the next slide, which is on the coal in particular. 87.2% is import dependent. In other words, we are very exposed to the volatilities in the international market. Now, if in the next slide, I wanted to just emphasize that insofar as fuel prices are concerned, there is adequate supply, but the problem has been price, the high price of fuel like gasoline, diesel, and so on. But since 1998, when we introduced the downstream oil deregulation law, the automatic price adjustments have been familiar now to our consumers, and they know that the price ultimately has to be reflected in the international prices. Increases would have to be reflected in domestic prices. But in electric power, this is not the case. Right now, we have both supply and pricing issues. But as you have also pointed out, there are issues involving generation, transmission, distribution as well. Now, in the case of next slide, please. Next slide. Uh, if the committee would like to show, we would like to show the committee this slide for the Luzon grid. This is for the for the remaining months of the year. As you can see there, the yellow alerts, the yellow line is for the required contingency reserve, and we are in danger of not meeting the required contingency reserves in the month of October. In August, we have already passed that. Fortunately, there were no interruptions, and I'm talking about the grid, Mr. Chairman. In the Visayas, we also showed the next slide shows you the red bars are the stranded power. In other words, there is adequate power being produced, especially in the island of Negros, but they cannot be used because there are not enough transmission lines to bring them to market in Cebu and other parts of the Visayas. But fortunately for the Visayas, there is excess capacity from Luzon, which is brought by submarine cable to the main Visayas grid, and that's why if you take a look at the yellow lines, there are blue dots there which show that insofar as the contingency reserves are concerned, they can be met by the additional supply from Luzon. This is also the case in the evenings when there is the evening peak. In the next slide. Next slide, please. The evening peak, we are short. In fact, there would be red alerts and yellow alerts. That means that we are not able to meet the reserve requirements, if not again for the infusion from Luzon. So as far as the grid is concerned in the Visayas, we are able to take advantage of that. But in Mindanao, Mindanao, the next slide. The next slide shows you that there is actually overcapacity in the island of Mindanao. And we cannot bring this to the Visayas because the submarine cable transmission lines have not yet been completed. So in the next few slides, I just wanted to quickly inform you and the committee, Mr. Chairman. Next slide, please. That NGCP, as far as Luzon is concerned, this is the Bataan Hermosa line. The National Grid Corporation, we are asking them to complete as scheduled this particular line, because there is again around 400 megawatts which is stranded for as long as this is not completed. In the case of the Cebu Negros Panay transmission, in the next slide, Mr. Chairman, this also shows additional capacity that will free up capacity from Negros and Panay to the rest of Cebu. And in the case of the Mindanao transmission, Mr. Chairman, in the next slide. The next slide, the original plan was for this to be completed in 2020. Now, because of the pandemic and for other reasons, it has been moved. For the revised completion target is October 2022. But so far, as of June 2022, 65% has only been completed. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give an opportunity to the private sector, particularly the independent electricity market operator, to present from the market perspective what are their observations regarding the supply and transmission. Then later, I would like to ask National Power Corporation to
Okay.
address the issues insofar as the SPAG, or missionary electrification areas, and the National Electrification Administration to address the issue particularly of Ormeco, which is also the subject of the resolutions filed before this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Lotilla. So in short, we have enough power supply.
Only for this up to the end of this year, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
But we are reviewing the what is supply demand outlook for the entire 2023 because we have lost the fuel for Ilihan, which is 1,200 megawatts.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary Lotilla. So in that case, I would like to turn to our distribution utilities, particularly the electric co-ops. Hindi naman po sikreto sa atin na karamihan ng mga problema na sa brownout at mahal na kuryente ay makikita sa mga lugar na hinahawakan po ng mga electric co-ops. Perhaps Pilreca can provide us with some insights. But before that, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Governor Eduardo Gadiano, Congressman Leody Tarieca, and Vice Governor Diana Apigo Tayag. Now, I would like to direct my question to Attorney Janine Colingan, Executive Director. Is the lady present?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Chair, present po. Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. Now, ma'am, ang pinaka-reason ba tayo nandito ngayon, isa sa pinaka-main reason is yung tuloy-tuloy po na brownout. Now,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
nasabi po ni Secretary Lotilla, meron man tayong supply ng kuryente. Tama naman yung supply ng ating electricity up to the end of this year. Pero bakit po noong mga nakaraang taon and even now, even while we speak, sa iba't ibang mga probinsya, lalo to sa mga co-op, palagi po nagkaka-brown out. Yung mga consumer po ninyo ay sick and tired of being sick and tired dito sa mga brownout natin, madam.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be invited in today's committee hearing, Mr. Chair. Please allow us to provide an insight. We have submitted our presentation for PhilReca, joint position paper for PhilReca and NAGMEC. But please allow me to provide the presentation, Mr. Chair. In fact, we agree with you, Mr. Chair, that there are a lot of power interruptions since these are inevitable in any distribution utilities. And that is why there are standards set by the regulatory bodies, the government like yung NEA po and ERC about allowable frequency for power interruptions and other parameters. The electric cooperatives are to comply with these standards. Meaning po, even if they incur outages, dapat po talaga within the parameters as set by the regulatory agencies. Meron po tayong tinatawag na power reliability indices, which is measured by SAIFI or SAIDI. Ano po ba ito? Ito po yung Systems Average Interruption Frequency Index, yung SAIFI, which indicates how often or ilang beses ba allowed na magkaroon ng interruption. And meron din po tayong tinatawag na System Average Interruption Frequency Index kung gaano po ba katagal ang interruptions na allowed. It must also be considered, Mr. Chair, that From the data we have gathered from the NEA for the quarterly compliance, there are 103 electric cooperatives who are compliant with the SAIFI and 105 electric cooperatives compliant with POWIT SAIDI. It must also be considered, Mr. Chair, that there are more than one player in the energy supply chain. It is not solely the distribution utility or the electric cooperative that can cause these interruptions. There is also the generation transmission sector who are also causes power interruption. The generation companies are allowed to conduct their preventive maintenance, and there are also instances when they impose power interruptions due to repair of their power plants. Also, Mr. Chair, the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, NGCP, also contributes to these interruptions due to transmission line faults, line repair, and upgrading, which are also necessary to ensure power reliability. We have conducted a survey, Mr. Chair, and out of 47 electric cooperatives who submitted their data, 18% was caused by the electric cooperatives of power outages, and 82% are caused by the suppliers or the generators. And for the other data naman po, Mr. Chair, there are 39% caused by the distribution sector and 61% by the transmission. Ibig sabihin ho, we share the liability. And with this, Mr. Chair, with the initial data that we have gathered, we call upon the electric cooperatives to continue working on the power.
Excuse me, attorney, may I interrupt?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Kanina sa lahat ng mga statement mo, parang lumilitaw, kayo po ay santo, wala po kayong kasalanan mga co-op, at ang kasalanan ipinapasa niyo po sa distribution at saka sa NGCP. And nabanggit niyo po kanina na doon po sa provision ninyo na allowed po ng ilang beses ang interruption and gaano katagal allowed ang power interruption. Now, doon sa dalawa, una, palaging naguhugas kamay kayo kanina pa. Para kayo nagpo-Poncio Pilato, I'm sorry for the word. And pangalawa, allowed ang power interruption at gaano katagal? 12 hours, is that allowable and almost every day? Define that to me.
Yes, sorry. Yes, Mr. Chair. Sabi naman po namin kanina, the interruptions are caused not only by the distribution utilities but the generation and transmission.
Sorry, Mama. So in other words, itong mga nangyayaring brownout and sa mga complaints na natanggap ko, even when I wasn't a senator yet, ako po isang broadcaster pa lamang, for so many years, palagi ako nakakatanggap ng reklamo na brownout. Wala kayong kasalanan doon. Ang lahat na may kasalanan ay yung distribution at saka NGCP at saka generation, etc. Kayo wala, malinis kayo. Is that what you're saying, ma'am?
Hindi po, Mr. Chair. Doon sa data na binigay ko kanina, meron pong mga power interruptions that are also being caused by the electric cooperatives.
Okay, so what are those power interruption that is being caused by the electric cooperatives? Doon muna tayo. Doon muna tayo sa inyo. Ano po yung sa tingin yung pagkukulang ninyo, bakit po nagba-brownout palagi?
Yes po,
At ano po yung solusyon nakikita ninyo na pwede nyo maibigay sa inyong mga consumer para hindi na po maging kalbaryo sa kanila yung palagi nilang pong brownout, madam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are vegetation problems or those, yung sinasabi po natin na clearing sa mga areas natin. Alam naman po natin ng mga electric cooperatives are in the areas. So may problem po ng vegetation, 35% po doon. And then it is also being caused by severe weather conditions. Marami
Sandali lang po, madam. Vegetation, are you talking about mga gulay? Ano ba yan? Puno? Dahon? Define vegetation.
Po, yung mga puno, yung mga branches and vines that go in the distribution lines of the electric cooperative.
Okay, hold on a minute. So, binanggit mo yung vegetation. So, are we not doing regular maintenance? Siguraduhin na yung mga puno, yung mga sanga, yung mga gumagapang-gapang na dyan na gulay-gulay, kaya maputol. Are you not doing that? Regular maintenance?
Conduct po, the preventive maintenance.
So if you're doing preventive maintenance, if you're doing that on a regular basis, so hindi nyo na po pwedeng gamitin rason yung vegetation. Kaya naman yung mga gulay na pagbibintangan sila. Naging sala rin yung mga gulay, yung mga puno, nananahimik yung mga puno at gulay na pagbibintangan sila. I'm sorry, I'm just being parang ginagawa ko ng katatawanan kaysa naman para lahat tayo rito mainit ang ulo, madam.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we agree with that po. So ito nga po yung mga lumalabas na kadahilanan. That's the reason why we call upon also our member electric cooperatives to do their best to act on the causes of the power interruption within their control. So kasama po dito yung, of course, there are other concerns like yung kailangan pong ayusin ang mga distribution system ng mga electric cooperatives, and nagkakaroon din ho ng mga animal intrusions sa mga linya po natin.
Okay,
And
animal.
mention
Sige po. So kanina mga gulay, mga puno, sanga, ngayon naman mga animal. Ano naman po ang problema dito sa mga hayop natin? Bakit po naging salarin itong mga animals?
nagkakaroon ho kasi ng electrocution sa linya, Mr. Chair, that causes interruption. Those are one
Okay.
of the, opo. Yun
Okay,
po.
so ito yung sinasabi mo siguro, mga daga, ahas, na napupulupot dun sa kuryente, kaya shortage o yung power trip, nagtitrip, tama?
Mr. Chair. Yes po.
Okay, so vegetation and then animals. Sige, ano pa po?
Yes po. We have also yung, na-mention ko po, yung severe weather condition. And we also have yung vehicular accidents. Kadalasan po kasi ang mga poste ng mga electric cooperatives are binabangga kung nagkakaroon ng loose control sa
Okay.
mga vehicles. Ito po yung mga tinatamaan.
That
And
I agree.
there
Wala
are
akong
also-
problema po dyan, madam. Okay, I follow you. Okay, I know where you're coming from. I know what you're saying. Now, ma'am, sorry, Abino, and then I'll have to interrupt. Ito ay base kasi sa mga complaints na na-receive ko at ayokong I lost track of these complaints that I'm receiving through the years. Now, yung sinasabi niyo po kanina na vegetation, tapos yung sa animals, sa transmission, okay lang po sana kung every once in a while magkakaroon ng brownout because of these reasons that you mentioned to us now. But if it is happening almost every week, almost on a daily basis, and for so many years, there has to be a serious problem. And what is that serious problem, ma'am, sa tingin niyo po? Kasi po, merong mga reklamo na tanggap ko po na 20 years na po, believe it or not. 20 years na, sabi nila, hindi po siya kinakasal, lagi ng brown sa lugar nila, and then nagka-up na siya, brownout pa rin yung lugar nila, palagi pa rin brownout. Paki-explain lang po, ma'am, in layman's term, yung madali po maintindihan ng taong bayan ni Juan de la Cruz.
Yes po. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Chair. As you have mentioned, tama po yun, there are interruptions, and I know kung interruptions pong pinag-uusapan, mahirap po talagang tanggapin ng ating mga member consumer owners. At nabanggit ko din po kanina, hindi po lahat control ng electric cooperatives, but we do not say that wala akong kasalanan ng mga electric cooperatives. And with this, Mr. Chair, we would like to provide some suggestions in order for these power interruptions to be addressed, Mr. Chair. First of all is, may we request the ERC to review the standard indices and its computation para makikita po talaga natin kung allowed pa ba talaga ang mga interruptions na nagagawa. Second, Mr. Chair, is these indices should not only be imposed in one sector. Na-mention ko nga po kanina, hindi dapat po ito sa distribution sector lamang. The energy supply chain, but it should also apply to the generation sector and transmission sector, as power interruption caused by this generation and transmission sector has a ripple effect to the distribution sector or the electric cooperatives. We also call upon our electric cooperatives to infuse capital investment by the distribution utility to upgrade and maintain their system, and which is also significant help. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, our predicament in this is that it takes time for the ERC, our regulator, to approve the applications of capital expenditure projects by the electric cooperatives. Kaya po nadidelay ang mga pag-upgrade natin ng mga linya natin at pag-impose po ng mga proyekto natin para po ma-improve ang mga system ng
Okay.
ating mga electric.
Attorney, so you're talking about the capital expenditure or CAPEX, right? So mabagal ang ERC sa pag-approve ng application for APEX, additional capital para sa pag-invest sa maintenance. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Opo.
Okay. So, kapag halimbawa napabilisan yung pag-approve ng ERC, kapag napag-usapan natin dito at ang ERC will cooperate with us, gagawa sila ng mga bagong systems in place para mapabilis yung approve ng CAPEX basta reasonable. Would that solve the problem of brownouts?
There is a significant factor that the power interruptions will be lowered, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sige. Sandali lang po, ma'am. Nabanggit niyo po kasi yung NGCP sa transmission. So, I'd like to call the attention of any member of the NGCP dito ngayon.
Good morning,
They're
Senator.
online. Okay. Can I see?
Good morning.
Okay. The third one, that's Attorney Almeda. Almeda.
Yes.
Attorney Almeda. Okay, kasi isa kayo sa mga nabanggit na reason ng mga electric cooperative sa Pelreca kung bakit po nagkakaroon po ng frequent outages sa mga off-grid particularly na. Okay. What is your reaction?
Good morning, Senator Rafi Tulfo, and good morning to the distinguished committee who is here, and of course to Pilreca also. And yes, we have our own problems in transmission, but we'd like to work hand in hand with all the power players with us here today and find solutions to all the problems we have. We can just do as much, but we would like to ask the committee also to help us to solve the problems of.
Sorry, let me interrupt you. Sorry, Ms.
Yes.
Attorney. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Bato de la Rosa. Senator de la Rosa, good morning to you, sir. Okay, I'm sorry for that interruption, Attorney. Go ahead po, Attorney Almeda, sir.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Attorney Almeda. I'm sorry again for the interruption.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman and Senator Chairman, can I read a statement and make a short presentation?
Go ahead po. The floor is all
Very
yours.
much, Chairman Senator Rafi Tulfo. To the Committee on Energy, the Chairman Senator Rafi Tulfo, and members of the distinguished committees, fellow guests, and resource persons, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Mr. Chair, Senator Rafi Tulfo, thank you for inviting us to this hearing. We are always eager to be part of the solution to alleviate the woes of power consumers. As power transmission operator, NGCP was granted by Congress the mandate to operate, maintain, and develop the power grid under Republic Act 9511. We are a private company and our operations are highly regulated by the Energy Regulation Commission. Our responsibilities under our franchise and concession agreement include efficient and reliable power delivery, managing the dispatch of power to the grid through our system operations, and meeting services for power customers. We support the Committee on Energy in its effort, and we are intent on working hand in hand with our partners in government and power industry. May I request Senator Rafi, this is Engineer Reddy Remoraso, our Assistant Vice President and Head, to make a brief presentation to the committee.
Go ahead, Engineer.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Attorney Almeda. Engineer, go ahead. The floor is all yours, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, to Committee on Energy Chairman Senator Rafi Tulfo, and to the honorable members of the committee, and to everyone, magandang umaga po. Nakikita na po ba ang
Go ahead.
aming po presentation?
Go ahead, sir. You're loud and clear. We can hear you.
Okay, we will be sharing a presentation, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Engineer.
Sige po, habang sineset up po yung presentation, NGCP is a private and Filipino corporation highly regulated by the Energy Regulatory Commission. So ang aming trabaho po ay we deliver power, we manage electricity traffic, we provide metering services to our customers. And who do we serve? Sino po ang aming mga customer? Kasama po dyan ang mga power generation companies who want to sell to grid-connected customers. Customer din po namin ang mga electric cooperatives, distribution utilities, at ganoon din po ang malalaking industrial customers na directly connected to the grid. We are granted with the concession and franchise to operate and maintain and expand the Philippine power grid. So mandate po namin, patuloy pong bukod po sa pag-operate and maintain, ay ganun din po ang expansion. And as mentioned by our President Almeda, we recognize our important role sa to ensure yung patuloy pong available ang aming mga transmission facilities. Doon po sa mga kung meron po tayong available power supply, kanina po nakita rin po natin sa presentation ni Secretary Lutilla ang mga levels, and meron po tayong ang sagot po namin sa kung merong enough supply ay yes and no. Yes, dahil on paper po malaki din po ang ating installed capacity. Pero sa day-to-day operation, ang nagiging importante po ay ang available capacity, na kung saan napapactor in na dito yung mga power plant maintenance outages at ganoon din po yung mga unplanned outages. At ganun po ang naging experience natin sa operation noong summer months in 2021 na nagkaroon tayo ng generation deficiency.
Mr. Almeda, makasingit lamang po. Okay,
Opo.
I'll let you speak after this as long as you want. Masingit ko lamang kasi nasabi mo kanina, you guys are part of the solution. You're always finding solution to the problem, right? You said that. Now, ano po yung motivation ninyo if you're really out there to find solution to a problem, especially sa brownout? What is your motivation na para kayo po ay maging part of solution? When in fact, I was informed na whether magkaroon ng brownout o whether walang brownout, pareho lang po yung kinikita ninyo. Kasi you will base it on the peak of demand. So halimbawa, doon sa buwan na may kuryente, ang peak demand is 1,000, itatype siya sa 30 yan. So, okay tayo dyan. However, kung halimbawa sa second month na 10 araw lang po ang supply ng kuryente sa isang lugar. So, yung peak demand sa 10 araw na halimbawa 1,000 din. So, again, you multiply that 1,000 to 30. So, pareho lang po. So, ito yung sinasabi nga po ng mga complainants ko sa programa ko na brownout, pero kami ay sinisingil pa rin ng parehong amount. Hindi ho ba na-short change na dudugasan po rito ang mga consumer? Sir? Do you follow me? Again, yung peak demand, tama ba? Correct me if I'm wrong. I-produce nyo po sa peak demand yung pag-charge nyo po sa inyong consumer. Ulitin ko po halimbawa, January, wala pong brownout. Perfect kayo. Okay? So, i-base nyo po dyan yung peak demand. Yung peak demand for January, na walang brownout, was 1,000. So, 1,000 iti-times sa 30. Right? Okay.
Senator.
Yes. So pagdating ng February, nagka-pornada na brownout left and right at 10 araw lang po nagkaroon ng kuryente. So yung 10 araw yun, hanapin niyo po yung peak demand. So sa peak demand halimbawa 1,000 pa rin. Even to 10 days lang po yan. So itatype siya pa ulit yung 1,000 times 30. So pareho lang po. Sa first month na may brownout, na walang brownout, second month na saksakan ng brownout, pero palang po yung charge nyo. So, wala po kayo motivation na para magtrabaho dahil whether magka-brownout, hindi kumikita ng NGCP. Am I right or am I right?
Mr. Chair, if I may answer. Opo.
Sir.
Ang operation po ng NGCP at tulad ng banggit namin is regulated by the ERC at binigyan po kami ng ERC ng mga performance indicators na magsusukat ng performance namin sa abilidad namin na makapagserbisyo ng within the standards sa ating mga customers. So tuwing nagkakaroon po ng power interruption due to transmission and availability, nagkakaproblema ang aming mga pasilidad, doon po kami tatamaan sa aming mga performance indicators.
Okay, sir.
Meron pong
Yeah,
impact
let's
sa
talk about. Sorry, sir. Don't talk to me about performance. Sorry, sir. I'm offended. That's an insult to the intelligence of your consumer.
Apologies.
And I, myself here. Kasi you're talking about performance. Sinabi ko na kanina, hindi po kayo nakapag-perform dahil nga po kasalanan po ninyo. For whatever reason, nagka-brownout, nagsisiya na nga po kayo nitong mga kooperatiba, Tropel Reca. Yun na po sa example ko lang, na whether brownout o hindi, lang po yung kikitain yung halos. Kaya nga po ito po yung complaint na palagi ko po na-receive sa programa ko po sa Wanted sa radyo, sa Rafi, Idol Rafi. Wala po kaming kuryente halos buwan. So, sir, yung bill namin, ganun pa rin. Or tumaas pa. Explain that to me, sir. Explain po yan sa taong bayan sa isang Juan de la Cruz na nanonood sa atin ngayon. Paano niyo po niya ma-explain, sir? In layman's term, hindi madali po maintindihan. Huwag po tayo masyado maging technical, sir.
Our apologies, Mr. Chair. Dun po sa binabanggit namin ng mga indicators ay kami po nagkakaroon ng penalty. Ang NGCP po ay merong penalty na base sa computation na nilatag ng Energy Regulatory Commission. So meron po mekanismo na kami rin po ay mapatawan nito at maging kabawasan din po sa revenue ng NGCP.
Also, you are being charged penalty kapag poor performance, halimbawa yung palaging brownout. Magkano naman po yung penalty? Paano po binabase yung penalty? Ano po yung sukatan para kayo po ay mapatawan ng penalty?
Yung penalty po, Mr. Chair, ay computed po ng ERC at nakabase po ito sa duration, gaano po katagal yung mga interruptions sa isang, meron po limang klase po yung mga indicators. So isa pong magandang halimbawa doon yung pong mga duration, system availability, kung gaano po katagal kaming nakakapag-provide ng continuous service sa aming mga customers.
Okay. Yung penalty po na binibayad niyo sa ERC, saan po napupunta yun? Para saan po yun? I'll ask the ERC later. Kasi po, I'm more on the consumer. Nabanggit mo lang po, nagbigyan ako ng example kanina na whether brown na to hindi, nagbabayad pa rin po yung po mga consumer. So sabi niyo, napipenalize po kayo ng ERC for that poor performance, if you will. Now, yung penalty na yun, na ibinabayad sa ERC, saan ginagamit ng ERC? Anong pagka-explain sa kanila? Kasi for me, yung penalty na yun, magkano man yun, dapat bayad na lang po yun sa mga consumer na nakaranas po ng mga brownout na short change. Diba? Kaysa ibabay sa ERC at hindi ko alam kung ano ginagawa ng ERC sa pera na yun. Yung ba'y pinag-good time? Ano po ba? Sorry again for the word. So but anyway, magkano po yung penalty? Halimbawa, doon sa binigay ko example, na 10 days lang po ang inyong performance. And yet, nagsingil po kayo doon sa tulad ng previous month, kompleto po yung electricity. Magkano po yung penalty? Halimbawa po, on the average. Go ahead po, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Do you need a break? Do you need some minutes? Then alis muna ako sir para makapag-usap ka sa mga kasama mo ba dyan?
siya na po, Mr. Chair.
Okay lang sir. Okay, sige. Balikan natin mamaya si Mr. Almeida habang siya po ay nakikipag-conference muna or may pag-usap sa kanyang mga kasamahan dyan. Now, doon naman ako sa ERC. May I see? Oh, si ERC is Ma'am Catherine P. Maceda. Okay. Ma'am Catherine, kayo po ay nabanggit kanina ng PhilReca na napakabagal nyo na po mag-approve ng kanilang application of loan or CAPEX. Kasi po kailangan din po yon. In fairness po sa mga kooperatiba, nakikita ko rin po talaga yung need na para mabigyan sila ng kapital para sa kanilang maintenance. Pero kung iniipit nyo naman po, kayo po talaga ang isa sa mga part of the problem, kaya nagkaka-brownout. Bakit po? Ano po ba yung proseso para whether or not ma-approvean po yung loan ng CAPEX o hindi? Attorney, Ma'am Catherine. Hello po. Nakamit po kayo? Ma'am Catherine Maceda?
Sir, can I be heard? Good morning po, Senator Tulfo, and to the honorable members of the committee. I hope I can be heard.
Yes,
Kasama,
we can hear loud and
kasama
clear.
po dito ang ating chairperson, Attorney Mona Dimalanta. But if I may just address po the question very briefly, and if the chair will allow me, I'd pass on the microphone to Chair Dimalanta in a bit. The ERC po conducts a process of regulatory reset involving po sa ating mga distribution utilities. Kasama na rin po sa mga ini-evaluate ng Commission ay yung pong mga CAPEX applications, PSAs, at marami pa pong ibang mga applications. Over the past 4 years, Your Honor, the Commission has been reviewing actually a number of backlogs po born out of years po no ng mga applications sa Commission. And over the last year po, marami pong mga applications sa CAPEX at saka mga point-to-point certificate of compliance na na-review po ng Commission. We admit that there are backlogs po, and we are under strict guidance actually from our new chairperson right now to make sure that all these applications be made current. It's a tall order po, but we're trying our best po to achieve that objective. If the chair will allow me po, if I can let our new chairperson, Attorney Dimalanta po, to address po the committee.
Okay.
Thank you po.
Attorney Dimalanta, before I'll acknowledge you, I have a question for Catherine Maceda. Okay, or do I have to address this question, Ms. Maceda, kay Attorney na lang, Dimalanta? Kasi my question is, gaano ba katagal yung process po ng application ng CAPEX? Kasi meron po kaming balita na kung minsan inaabot po ng 9 years. Ano po pinanggagawa niyo po dyan sa ERC? Ilan po ba kayong tao? Kulang ba kayo sa manpower para abutin po ng 9 years? Ma-approvehan po yung CAPEX application? Simple lang naman po yan, ma'am eh. Whether qualified, hindi qualified. Kung hindi qualified, then huwag natin pahirapan pa yung mga applicants. I-decline, i-deny, sabihin hindi pwede. More documents needed, etc. Kaysa naman bibitinin niyo po for 9 years.
Salamat po, Mr. Chair. Sana po naririnig niyo po ako mabuti.
Yes, loud and clear po, ma'am.
Malabo po yung audio.
No, loud and clear, madam.
Po yung tanong kung gaano katagal. Ang CAPEX application po kasama po siya sa EVOS law. So, mula nung naging epektibo po yung EVOS law, ang period that's allowed for a CAPEX application is 270 calendar days po. So yung mga in-apply po mula nung naging effective yung EVOS law, pasok na po sila dun sa period na yon. Siguro po yung sinasabi po kanina ni Commissioner Maceda na kailangan naming habulin pa at magsisipag po talaga kami parang mahabol yung bulto-bulto ng application that preceded the EVOS law. And so far, sa data po namin, we currently have 630 applications filed as of this year. Yung iba po dito, luma na po din talaga. Ang pending po dito, 210 applications. So yun po yung hahabulin po namin kasama nung mga naka-apply na po, pasok na dun sa 270 days. Hindi naman din po sa pinahihirapan yung mga applicant, pero kailangan din pong maging diligent yung ERC sa pag-aproba ng mga applications kasi po ipapasa po yung kaukulang charges dun sa consumers po natin. So gusto lang din po nating siguraduhin na yung mga ipapasang gastos ay tama pong gastos at kailangan pong gastusin talaga ng electric cooperative o ng private distribution utility. Yun lang po, Mr. Chair.
Thank you po, Ma'am Catherine Maceda. Mabalik na ulit ako, mabilis lang sa NGCP. Okay, napag-usap-usap na po kayo tungkol po doon sa penalty, kung saan po napupunta yung penalty. Or you want me to go to ERC since I'm talking to ERC already? Tama ba ERC po yung binigit nyo, Mr. Almeida? Tama?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Yeah,
sige
we'll
po.
answer.
So babalik po ulit ako sa ERC. Ma'am Catherine Maseda, nabanggit po kasi ng NGCP na kapag sila po ay hindi nag-perform ng maayos, napipenalize po sila ng ERC. Ang tanong ko po, magkano po the average yung penalty sa mga hindi nagpe-perform na maayos pag hindi perform maayos ang NGCP? Saan po napupunta yung pera na pinapataw na penalty?
Maraming salamat po, Chair, if you will allow me. Doon po sa IPIRA, meron pong provision doon na nagsasaad kung magkano po yung pwedeng i-penalize sa hindi lamang po NGCP, kung hindi yung mga regulated entities din po.
Okay.
Pwede pong hanggang 50 million po yun. Now,
Okay.
in the case of NGCP, Your Honor, the determination of penalty will have to be made through a reset process po. And
Okay.
we're talking here of the years from the last time that they had the reset po hanggang po itong tinatawag natin na fifth regulatory reset. Pag tinitignan po yung penalty, Your Honor, titignan po dyan kung na-meet po nila yung mga performance indicators. Nabanggit po kanina ng ating kaibigan sa NGCP, yung isang uri po ng indicator tulad po nung sinabi nila nung deviation from system delivery, no, and among other things. Yun po ay isa-isa pong titignan ng komisyon kapag po nag-reset process. Yung pong revenues o yung mga penalties po na makukuha dito ay lahat po ipinapasa po yan sa National Treasury kapag nakolekta na po ng ERC. Hindi po namin pwede i-retain yan kasi nakaloob po yun sa kondisyon ng ating General Appropriations Act po, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, so very clear yan. So napupunta sa National Treasury yung mga naipapato na penalty
Opo.
dahil sa poor performance ng NGCP at iba pang stakeholders. Tama?
Yes, sir. In fact po, kung marirecall po ninyo, nagkaroon po ng series of outages actually last year. Marami rin mo pong mga utilities ang na-penalize, mga generation companies in particular. Yung pong mga binayad po nila ay lahat po niremit po namin sa National Treasury po. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you. Alright, bago tayo mag-move on sa NPC, babalikan ko lang saglit po itong ating ERC. I don't know kung ito pong aking isa-suggest would sit in dito sa inyo na katanggap-tanggap or sensible ba? Sana, mga sir, kung hindi po kayo nakakapag-perform, wag niyo na po, kalimutan niyo na po yung penalty. Kalimutan niyo na po yung penalty kasi napupunta para sa National Treasury yon. Wag na po kayo mag-charge. Kung hindi po nakaka-perform kayo, hindi po kayo nakaka-deliver ng electricity sa mga konsumo ng isang kooperatiba, heck, nipis-nipis na po natin yung mga mukha natin. Wag na po natin singilin ang mga consumer na nasira po yung kanilang mga appliances dahil panay ang brownout, na bankrupt po yung kanilang mga negosyo dahil mga brownout, hindi na nakapag-aral na maayos yung kanilang mga estudyante dahil brownout, at meron pang gana kayo na mag-charge sa kabila ng wala naman kayong nabibigay na maayos na serbisyo. So baka pwedeng bawas-bawasan po natin yung kapal ng mga mukha natin. I'm sorry again for the word. Nagbulat na kasi itong sama ko ng loob to the years. Ikinig po sa mga reklamo ng mga consumer natin na kinakawawa years and years and years ago pa. So baka pwede, sir, pag-isipan niyo po yung ways na kung wala kayo nabibigay na electricity, wala kayong performance, wag na po kayo mag-charge. Parang awa niyo na. Sa palagay niyo po, sir, am I making sense to you, sir? Am I talking sense to you?
We
Am I
acknowledge,
making sense to you?
Senator. Yes, we acknowledge Senator Rafi.
Opo. Ito po ay
Thank you po.
on behalf of the Juan de la Cruces. Okay. So, yan po siguro pag-aralan niyo po. Ano?
Yes,
Pag-
Senator. We do po.
At because po kayo po ang dahilan sa brownout na yon. So, wag niyo na pong problemahin yung penalty po. Problemahin niyo lang po yung kawawang taong bayan. Wag na po tayo mag-charge. Yun lang po, okay? Salamat po. Meron po kayong gustong sabihin. Sige, pindot na mikropono. Sige po. The floor is all yours.
Recognize, Mr. Chair. Gusto
Apo.
lang po,
Go ahead po, sir.
gusto din po namin idagdag, Mr. Chair, yung mga sa transmission interruption pa, sa ngayon ay hindi wala yung pong performance or yung serbisyo ng NGCP ay pumapasok pa po doon sa standards prescribed.
Standard prescribed. Yes, sir. Standard prescribed. But you're hearing, but you're not listening.
Yung pong mga, so sorry,
You're
Mr.
hearing,
Chair.
but you're not listening, sir. Nakikinig ka pero hindi mo ako napakikinggan. Ang sinasabi ko po, in short, kapag ang performance ninyo, hindi po kayo nakapag-deliver because of your fault, nagkaroon ng brownout sa isang lugar, huwag na po kayo mag-charge. Kasi po, ang nangyari sa ngayon, present setup, nag-charge pa rin kayo. Regardless whether brownout o hindi. Kaya kanina sa umpisa pa lang sabi ko, wala kayong motivation na paganda yung servisyo dahil magka-brownout man o hindi brownout, halos pareho lang po masisingil nyo. Kumbaga, nakapikit na lang kayo, pwede na kayo magpay-pay-pay-pay kasi dumarating pa rin yung pera. Yan po yung point ko. Yan po yung point ni Juan de la Cruz. Ano po? Okay, sir?
Okay po, Mr. Chair.
Salamat po. Unless kung gusto mo pang humirit, sir. Okay naman. Hirit po kayo, hindi na.
Po, Mr. Chair.
Salamat po, sir. Okay. Now, let's move on to sa NPC. Pwede makita yung taga-NPC, si Attorney Melchor Redulme. Good morning to you, Attorney Melchor. Is that Melchor? Sorry. Melchor?
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Morning.
Okay. Attorney, good morning. Ano po yung status po ng SPAG operations and electrification sa off-grid islands? Ito po yung sa mga co-op, ito po yung madalas na nagkakaroon po ng brownout itong sa mga off-grids. Ano pong estado ngayon ng SPAG operations po natin, sir, Attorney?
Yes, again, good morning, Mr. Chairman, and to the honorable members of the Senate Committee, and to our good secretary. Mr. Chair, we were instructed to provide information. We submitted today our presentation. If you will allow me, I have a few slides that I can share for you to appreciate better our report, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you.
Go ahead po, it's okay with us, Attorney.
Ask the Secretariat, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
To share
Please
our
go ahead, Mr.
presentation.
Chairman.
Go ahead po.
So again, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Our slides, just a few slides with the two topic outline, the missionary electrification and the overview of SPAG operations.
Okay.
The next slide would show the extent of the NPC SPAG operation in the several islands in the Philippines. NPC has actually 158 plants covering 150 areas with a dependable capacity of 171 megawatts. The rest of the islands are supplied by the new power providers, which have 24 plants with an area of 21, with a total dependable capacity of 307. So in all, Mr. Chair, we have around 182 plants in the missionary areas with 171 areas with a dependable capacity of 478. Please note that in the slide, Mr. Chair, we have for NPC, we have around 86 plants that have 24 hours operation. We have 18 plants that have 12 to 23 hours operation, and we have 54 plants that has less than 12 hours operation. And we also have several islands where we construct transmission lines and substations, mainly Masbate, Mindoro, Palawan, Catanduanes, and Marinduque. Our total existing transmission lines is composed of 1,114.99 circuit kilometers. Our existing substations is equivalent to 215 MVA capacity. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, as to the status of SPAG plant operations, Mr. Chair, as I've said, we have around 158 SPAG plants. with a total dependable capacity of 171 against the 101 megawatt peak demand. So if we go on the dependable capacity, we have sufficient power that is being provided by NPC in its areas that they are responsible. As of September 5, 2022, all NPC plants are in normal operation except for the following. We have 15 identified plants in the SPAG areas. And these are mainly from, of course, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So out of these 86 plants, which are operating 24 hours, we have 8 plants that have some problem. All of these are technical problems and some problems on fuel holding. One of the 18 plants that operate for less than 24 hours has a problem also, and 6 of the 54 plants that are running less than 12 hours have technical problem also. The next slide would show the details of the problem, and I would not belabor the committee because we already submitted this. And if you will notice, these are technical issues that we can address in a day's time or two, subject to, of course, the availability of parts that needs to be replaced. So that ends our presentation, Mr. Chair, as to the status of SPAG operations in the missionary areas. Thank you.
I would like to acknowledge the presence of our Senate President, Senator Migz Zubiri.
Chairman. Sorry, Sec, I'm just working on problems with the blue ribbon. Thank you, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Now, I would like to direct my attention to Governor Eduardo Gadiano from Occidental, Mindoro. Governor, good morning to you, sir. Ano po yung reaction niyo po dun sa mga sinabi po ng NPC? Para po sa inyo, sa mga taga-LGU, saan po talaga ang problema? Bakit po nagkakaroon po ng brownout sa inyong mga lugar, especially kayo po sa off-grid?
Opo, good morning po, Mr. Chair at sa lahat ng members. Ang problema po namin doon talagang brownouts at saka shutdown, walang fuel, ang OMCPC. Talagang alaki po ng problema. Nung pumasok ako yung CPC, ang alam namin ma-solve na, pero mas lumala. Ang UMECO ay wala namang guts na i-terminate yung kanilang PSA kahit hindi nakapag-deliver ng ayos. So talagang kami ngayon, nandito kami ngayon, nag-brownout po sa amin, sa Mindoro. Mayroong tinayo ang NPC doon ngayon. Alam ko, noong August 30 o 29-30, nagkaroon sila ng test, 10 megawatts. Alam ko, hinihintay na ang decision ng NPC para mag-supplement doon sa power crisis ng Occidental Mindoro yung 10 megawatts ng Napocor. Yun po, sir, kaya kung gusto niyo po, sir, kung tawagan niyo kami, mag-represent po kami ng ilang bullet points ng mga problema namin po doon.
Sige po, sige po.
Can I call Attorney Rick daw? Nice, sir. Bullet points lang, sir, para kunting ko lang.
Go ahead.
Para mga issues and concerns ng province of Occidental Mindoro.
Okay. Bago, okay. So is this, what's his name? Is swearing natin. Okay. So you have to swear in. Comsec. Oh, buti. Oh, swearin mo. Sige.
Right. Sure.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this Honorable Committee. Thank you, sir. You may now take your seat. For the record, Mr. Chair, the resource person answered in the affirmative.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Good morning po.
Good morning po to the members of the committee and the guests here this morning. Next slide, please. Next slide. Sir, in Occidental Mindoro, there's the distribution utility is the Occidental Mindoro Electric Cooperative or OMECO. In 2014, it entered into a PSA with Emerging Power Inc. EPI is supposed to put up a geothermal power plant. Hindi po namin maintindihan bakit po sila pinayagan na mag-put up ng geothermal power plant doon, samantalang wala naman pong geothermal power sa Occidental Mindoro. So as expected po, there was no electricity generated by EPI. As the province is off-grid po, the power provider was allowed to recover subsidy from the ERC-approved universal charge for missionary electrification or UCME, and the NAPOCOR SPAG pays the difference between the true cost of generation rate and the SAGR. Next slide, please. Again, as mentioned, it was supposed to deliver 40 megawatts of electricity by 2017, but the geothermal power plant has not generated a single watt of electricity. It built a bunker fuel diesel power plant, which was supposedly a backup, but this became the primary power plant. Thereafter, the EPI assigned po its rights under the PSA to Mindoro Geothermal Power Corp for its primary geothermal power plant and the Oriental Mindoro Consolidated Power Corporation or OMCPC for the bunker diesel power plant. Pagkatapos po nun, nawala na po na parang bula yung MGPC kasi wala naman po talagang geothermal power. So ang nakakausap na lamang po ng OMECO ay yung OMCPC.
Okay, sir, if I may interrupt you. So, nagtayo po ng geothermal plant doon na inutil naman and yet nakakapag-kolekta ng subsidy. Sino po nag-authorize na makapagpatayo ng geothermal power plant sa Occidental Mindoro?
Ang proseso po kasi niyan, magkakaroon po ng tinatawag na CSP. So, nagkakaroon po ng bidding. Ang
Sino pong approving power?
Yung magkakaroon po ng PSA na tinatawag, ang mag-a-approve puro na yung ERC.
ERC.
So, nagkaroon po ng approval ng ERC po yun.
So, ERC approve yung pagkakaroon ng geothermal power plant doon na alam naman ng ERC na hindi makapag-perform yung geothermal kasi wala man geothermal talaga doon. And yet, kumukolekta ng subsidy. Ito ba inaiparating nyo sa ERC? Hindi nyo ba question ng ERC dito para sa akin, anomaly po ito?
Question po ito ng ilang ulit nung ni Governor Gadiano and then po ng mga consumers po. Kaya nga, ang nangyari po kasi 2014 po yon, ang pangako nila, 2017 magkakaroon po ng power yung geothermal. Pero ang nangyari po, wala pong na-generate na electricity. So, nagkaroon na po ng demand na dapat magkaroon po ng bagong CSP or yung bagong bidding ang OMECO ng bagong power provider.
Sige, sandali po, Sarah, excuse me. I'll go back to ERC. Si ERC Commissioner Catherine Maceda or Chairperson. Sino pa pong present sa ERC ngayon? Sino pong matapang?
Ako na lang po, Your Honor.
Sige. So, ma'am, pakisagot lang, reaction na inaprubahan niyo po, nag-bidding, nagproseso, hanggang sa ma-aprubahan po yung pagpapatayo ng geothermal power plant doon, na alam niyo naman po from the start na wala po ito, hindi po nakakapag-firm to, impossible na mapapakinabangan to, and yet pinayagan pang mga kolekta ng subsidy. Ano po ang reaction niyo doon, Madam? Ma'am? Ma'am, naka-off po kayo, naka-mute po kayo, madam. Ma'am, naka-mute po kayo.
Ito na lang po. Mas naririnig po ba?
Very clear na po, madam.
Okay po. Yun po kasing hatian po ng trabaho sa power supply agreement. Yun pong power supply agreement, pag na-award na po or napirmahan na ng utility, saka po pumupunta sa ERC. By that time, yun pong kung ang source po ng kuryente ay renewables, katulad po ng geothermal, meron po dapat itong RE contract, RE service contract na ida-award ni DOE. Si DOE po yung nagde-determine kung meron ba talagang geothermal resource dun sa area. Nung pumunta po yung kontrata sa ERC, meron po siyang geothermal service contract. So, nanalig po ang ERC dun sa submission na
Okay.
yon. Pero binigyan din po ng warning. Kasi po kung makikita po
Okay.
dun sa, may records din po kami, we can submit to the committee para po we are all properly guided. Ilang beses pong binigyan ng warning na ito na lang, huling palugit kung gagamitin yung bunker facility para punan yung requirement ng electric cooperative. Noon nga pong mukhang hindi na talaga madedeliver yung geothermal, tinigil na din po ng ERC yung pag-approve dun sa palugit
Okay.
na hiningi po nung power generator.
So di mo ba dapat, ma'am, gumagawa kayo ng due diligence bago ho kayo mag-approve, nag-imbestiga ho kayo, gumagawa kayo ng research, pag-aaral, etc. But anyway, tinutulong niyo po yung DOE.
Chair, ASEC Mario Marasigan will...
Okay, naghugas kamay po ang ERC, so itinuturo po kayo, DOE, so ASEC Mario Marasigan, isagot lang po yung paghugas kamay po ng ERC at kayo po itinuturo. Ano pong reaksyon niyo po, sir?
Maraming salamat po sa katanungan, Your Honor, and magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Yes, the Montelago geothermal
Go ahead po.
Thank you very much po ulit sa tanong. If I may continue po. Nagkaroon po talaga ang Emerging Power Incorporated ng service contract sa Department of Energy for the development of the Montelago Geothermal Power Project. Ito po ay naumpisahan pa noong early 2010 at kasama po dito ang actually natin yung dating PNOC corporation sa pag-identify. Meron naman po na-identify. Unfortunately po, hindi po nakapag-deliver based po dun sa condition ng service contract ang Emerging Power Incorporated. Dito po nagmula, kaya na-cancel po yung service contract ng Emerging Power. So, by 2018 nga po, wala na po yung kanilang service contract. Nahinto na po yung kanilang operation. So dito po, nagsuggest na po tayo na baguhin na yung power supply agreement ng UMECO, maghanap na ng ibang supplier ng kuryente.
Okay.
Kasi alam po natin na yung pong sinusupply na kuryente ng Occidental Mindoro or OMCPC ay replacement power lang nung geothermal power project. Unfortunately po, hindi kaagad nakapag-conduct ng competitive selection process ang UMECO. Kung saan po, dahil walang ilang supplier, napilitan po ang UMECO na sila lang mag-supply ng kuryente. At late na po nung sila po ay magkaroon ng competitive selection process. Kahit po natapos yung competitive selection process, nagkaroon naman po ng iba't ibang interpretasyon pagdating po doon sa approval ng provisional approval ng ERC. At kung saan po hanggang sa ngayon, humihingi po ng kapaliwanagan ang OMCPC kung paano po yung pagbabayad. Ngayon sa parte naman po ng kagawaran ng enerhiya, nag-conduct po tayo ng energy audit doon sa UMECO. Nakita po natin yung mga diferensya kung saan nag-suggest po tayo. Ang isa po nating suggestion is sa pag-conduct nga po ng competitive selection process, dapat po mas marami yung makasali. Dahil kung mas marami yung makakasali, mas magkakaroon po ng competition doon sa area. So hanggang doon na lang po kasi na-conclude na po yung competitive selection process kung saan meron pong 3 areas na binibigyan. Hindi ko po alam kung paano ko ipapaliwanag. Yung pong lahat ng resulta ng competitive selection process, napunta po lahat sa OMCPC.
Okay.
Yun lang po ang kaya ko ipaliwanag sa ngayon. So,
Okay.
kung paano po natin ma-improve ang solusyon doon sa Occidental Mindoro, sa akin po, personal na opinion, kailangan po talaga madagdagan ng ibang supplier sa Occidental Mindoro.
So dapat
Salamat.
open for competition. Tumatawa ka. You want to say something, Senator Bato de la Rosa, sir? Go ahead po. The floor is all
Mr.
yours.
Chairman, thank you. Ako lang is, pag-intindi lang ng ordinaryong tao ba, itong ginagawa natin proseso na ganito, open tayo ng competitive selection para masolve ang problema. Then later on, useless lang pa rin, wala pala nangyari, balik pa rin sa OMCPC. Are you sure? Ako honestly, Asik Marsigan, sigurado ka talaga na walang ibang sumali sa competitive one? Wala talaga?
Meron naman po kung baka sumaling ilan. Unfortunately nga po, ang nanalo po, ang nakapag-offer po ng pinakamababang rate at the time po. Kasi wala pa pong masyadong problema sa crudo at the time, yung sa fuel cost. Nagkataon po na yung OMCPC talaga ang may pinakamababang offer. So, kasi ang maaari po nating makita doon is nandun na po kasi yung MCPC. Meron na silang mga planta. Yung pong mga pwede nila makalaban ay wala pa. Pero ang isa po natin nakikita is pwede naman kasi kung maganda talaga yung terms of reference natin, then may inganyo po yung ibang sumali. Yun lang po yung pwede naming masabi.
Kasi,
Salamat.
Mr. Chairman, kung talagang napakalaking probinsya itong Oriental Mindoro, I don't think so na hindi magka-interest yung Occidental Mindoro. I don't think so na hindi magka-interest yung ibang players ng industry players diyan. Sigurado ako kadami diyan. Meron ayaw ko lang magbanggit pero ang daming players diyan. Bakit kaya ganun pa rin? Back to zero. Back to square one yung sitwasyon natin dyan. Kaya pabalik-balik. Yun lang sa akin, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator
Mr. Chairman,
Bato de la Rosa. Go ahead po.
Administrator Vanessa will be able to comment also
Nea?
on that.
Mr. Vanessa, go ahead. You're being
Good morning.
acknowledged, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Senator Tolfo, and the members of the Senate Committee on Energy, and to everyone. In the case of the CSP in Occidental Mindoro, everybody wonders why it is still OMCPC when in fact, if the record shows, anyway, the process of CSP went through a competitive, of course, bidding whereby OMCPC has been the lowest bidder and the advantage over others. Existing na sila, Mr. Chair, kasi pagka may power plants na sila, pag hindi kasi existing, yung time of delivery of power will take longer kung new player. But then, the ultimate goal is lowest bidder talaga sila. And in fact, Mr. Chair, another consideration is when we are talking of a long-term contract for any power provider in Occidental Mindoro, is the projection that the island of Mindoro will eventually be connected to the grid. So that is already incorporated in the TOR, anticipating that once the island of Mindoro is connected to the main grid, that means the contracts actually that we or OMECO has given out for bidding ay limited lang, sir, sa 5 years because of the expectation na bababa yung kuryente natin sa Mindoro once pumasok na na-connect na sa grid. So that's one consideration ng economics ng short-term contract, Mr.
Pero
Chair.
nilagay niyo ba yung terms of reference? Was it reviewed?
It was reviewed, Mr. Chair. It went through NEA and then went through the DOE for final refinement before it's approved and given a notice to proceed by NEA, Mr. Chair. So it went through stages, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vanessa.
Thank you, sir.
You want to go ahead?
Mr. Chairman, gusto ko lang masabi ba na pa itong supply agreement, power supply agreement, eh, para rin yung politiko eh. O para rin politics rin yan eh. Dahil, alam mo, sabi mo, 5 years lang. Sa atin sa politika, di ba? 6 years is too long for a bad president. 6 years is too short for a good president. Di ba? Kaya siguro, paano nyo, o bakit hindi kayo nakaka-attract ng magagaling na power supplier, ibang players dahil yung terms of reference is 5 years. Takot sila, hindi sila papasok dahil hindi sila makabawi sa kalang investment. Very short, 5 years. So nakita pala ninyo yan, hindi nyo inadyasan. Sabihin nyo na adyasan natin para hindi ma-monopolize ng OMCPC itong yung Occidental Mindoro. O dapat inadyasan ninyo. Yun lang sa akin, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir. Kung
Okay, makadugtong lamang Thank you, Senator Bato de la Rosa. Bakit hanggang ngayon po hindi pa connected sa grid yung Umeco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Mindoro Island is not yet interconnected to the Luzon grid, Mr. Chair, pending sa completion ng submarine cable ng NGCP, Mr. Chair. If I may add, Mr. Chair, yung 5 years kasi is calculated actually, Mr. Chair, time para sa interconnection. So may better competition coming from the mainland, nabababa talagang kuryente ng Mindoro. Kasi si bunker kasi itong planta ni OMCPC, Mr. Chair. So mahal talaga. So pending sa completion ng NGCP interconnection, Mr. Chair. Kaya short term yung ginawa. Nag-award na talaga, Mr. Chair, ng dalawang tatlong locations kasi yung pinabid natin na ng OMCPC ng Umeco, I mean. Pero yung dalawa na-award na, Mr. Chair. However, may provisional authority pang na inaantay from ERC sa MAPSA, yung Mamburao, Abra, the Ilog, at saka Santa Cruz, at saka yung Sablayan. May shortcomings din actually, Mr. Chair, yung OMCPC sa submission ng documents sa ERC, kaya nga hindi pa rin sila nabigyan ng permanent nila na authority to operate, Mr. Chair. So may mga issues pa na pinaplan sa Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vanessa. Before I move on, and I have a question for Vice Governor Diana Tayag. Di ko alam kung natapos na yung issue tungkol doon sa geothermal power plant na it existed from 2014 to 2017 at nakatanggap po ng subsidy. Did I understood it right?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. No, the geothermal project did not receive any subsidy at the time, but rather whoever was the supplier at the time, because it's a missionary area.
Okay. All right. So, walang natanggap na subsidy. So, kasi
Yung
understand-
geothermal project, wala po siya natanggap.
Wala natanggap. Okay.
But Senator, for the replacement power,
Yeah.
for the diesel or bunker fuel,
Yeah.
they receive the subsidy.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your answer, ASEC Mario Marasigan, and Secretary Lutilla. Meron na akong question kay Vice Governor Diana Tayag. Vice Governor.
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Vice Governor. Ano po yung subsidy from UCME na natatanggap po ng OMCPC ngayon?
Oo, galing po sa Napocor, may kulang po yung subsidiya nilang natatanggap ngayon, Senator. Senator, galing kami na Occidental Mindoro. May message ako at saka konting, pwede ko po bang kunin yung pagkakataon na to?
Sige po, ma'am.
Na i-message. Dito na rin si Secretary Lutilla at ang mga energy body. So magandang umaga po, Idol Rafi Tulfo,
Ma'am.
Senator, and Senator Bato de la Rosa. Ako po as Vice Governor of the Province of Occidental Mindoro and the Presiding Officer of the Sangguniang Panglalawigan. Napunta po talaga kami dito to advocate for the interest of our people in Occidental Mindoro. As you all know, ang probinsya po namin tinatawag na brownout capital of the Philippines. Because of the persistent issue on the power supply that captures national attention, nagpunta kayo ng TikTok, makikita niyo po doon ano ang lalawigan na isang taon, buong taon, ko. Pag tinignan niyo po doon ang sagot, Occidental Mindoro. Dahil buong taon ho, patay sindi ang ilaw namin. Nakakaiyak. So, I together with my fellow local officials, ang ating Namalagov Edgar Jano and Congressman Tariela, are before you to present to you the reality on the ground and provide to you to the best as we can how the lack or shortage of a stable, reliable, and continuous power supply in our province had affected the quality of life in our province and our provincial economy. Konti lang po ito.
Go ahead.
We are here before you to put a face, the statistics and reports, to humanize the problem. Hindi lang kami statistics, and to make our case and plea on behalf of the people of Occidental Mindoro for a solution in the spirit of the whole of the government approach. Occidental Mindoro is a prism. What is happening in the power generation industry, at least in off-grid islands. We are the typical captive market, and we are in a hostage situation with one distribution utility, one power supplier. Hindi ko maintindihan ba't nag-iisa ho ang power supplier namin at hindi nagbibigay ng maayos at magandang serbisyo sa aming lalawigan. We hope that by relaying the situation in our province po before this committee, legislations and policies will be crafted to address the gaps in the present law that allowed a situation like that in Occidental Mindoro to come to be. May mga problema po kami. Yung aming Board of Trustees sa Umeco, hindi po sila gumagalaw. Hindi nila pinipenalize ang aming power provider. Nagtataka din ako kanina, tama po kayo, takang-taka ako, bakit sila pa rin ang nanalo sa 3 power supply agreement, yung nag-iisang power provider. Nakakalungkot na tinailor fit yung TOR nila, para sila pa rin na manalo. Nung una ho, sa terms of reference, requirement ng Umeco, brand new na generator or genset so ang ipasok. Kung sa OMCPC, luma na eh. Nag-operate na yan ng napakatagal. Pero, nung malapit na po, Senator, binago nila yung TOR nila. Ginawa nila na pwede ng second hand. Kaya pa ganun-ganun ho ang aming mga gensets doon pasira-sira. So, hindi nila ni-level ang playing field. Ang daming interesado, Senator, na pumasok sa aming lalawigan. Yung Umeco na property nila, pinarent nila sa OMCPC, libre. Habang ang ibang power supplier na gustong pumasok doon, napabili nila ng lupa. That is, I think, the reason bakit as ang naging bid nung ibang power supplier na gustong bumili doon. Hindi nila ni-level ang playing field. Ang dami ko pa pong tanong.
Go ahead po.
Sorry.
Vice ko.
Pero nilista ko yung sasabihin ko, Senator. Baka makalimutan ko. Ano po yung mga available na remedy sa amin doon? Bakit yung CSP hindi nila inayos? Tapos, yun po. Marami pa. Ilagay ko na lang po. Ang dami ko pong tanong bakit yung distribution utility namin inaalaw nila na mangyari yan. Pinapatay ho nila ang ekonomiya ng aming lalawigan. Marami pong question at problems area sa Occidental Mindoro, and these are not empty words, but one born out of experience in Occidental Mindoro, where a backup power plant provider had become the main power provider through underhanded tactics. We look forward to creative and acceptable policy situations po with these problems. Actually, I'm sorry kay Attorney Nick daw, may prepare din ho kasi sana akong sariling presentation kung i-allow nyo. Kasi ano po ba ang present problem? What is happening in Occidental Mindoro right now? Kakatapos lang ho. Noong September 1, 36 hours blackout kami. Every time the power supplier has collection issues, we experience blackout. Pinapatay kami ng kuryente.
Parang nananadya.
So, wala siyang pakialam. Para kami ay, since captive market niyo ho kami, hostage kami, wala kaming ibang pinagkukunan, na pending ho yung kanyang fuel sa Batangas Port, hindi siya gumawa ng paraan. Pwede naman siya mag-arkila ng barko. Ako ho, Senator, nagpautang ng sarili kong diesel, 40,000 liters, para lamang yung 36 hours na po na blackout na nararanasan namin ay matigil kahit sandali. Magkaroon man lang ng reprieve. Pinautang ko ho. Pero bakit siya? Wala siyang ginagawa, yung power supplier. Pwede mo siya markila ng barko para dumating ho yung mga fuel niya. Ang lagi niya nalang dahilan, inintay niya yung barko. So kami ho, nag 36 hours na blackout.
Thank you po, Vice Governor. Wala ba rito yung Umeco?
Ho.
Hindi ba natin pinasampi ng Umeco para masagot sana?
Tapos ay Senator, may last pa po ako.
Go ahead.
Na-penalize po yung aming, tanungin ko na rin po sa ERC, bakit ganon? Tsaka sa PhilReca kanina, bakit po nila pinenalize yung aming electric cooperative ng 300 million plus for the subsidy? Ngayon, hindi naman makabayad yung aming cooperative. Isa rin po yun sa problema namin ngayon. Baka pwede namang i-reverse nila yung ruling nila na pinipenalize yung aming cooperative ng 380 million yata, hindi nila kayang bayaran.
Okay.
Opo.
Thank you, Vice Governor. Who wants to react? Yeah.
Mr. Senator, what was mentioned was the long-term solution, which is the interconnection of Mindoro Island to the grid. And Senator, that is really the long-term solution. But there have been delays. The original filing was made many years ago, and the amount of time required to build it was 9 years. There was a refiling in 2021. And this time, the interconnection will take at least 4 to 5 years of implementation. So our problem really now, even if that will be on time, is what will we provide Occidental Mindoro with during the 5-year period? And that's what Administrator Juanesa was talking about, that the PSA, the power supply agreement, will only be for a period of 5 years and cannot be longer. But I do acknowledge that what the Vice Governor and the Governor have been saying, and the Congressman is here to assert that, one, the problem is also with the electric co-op itself.
Okay. So in other words, ailing po yung electric cooperative.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so
it's ailing, right?
The way the Vice Governor was stating facts kanina, parang may problema po sa papatakbo ng kooperatiba. Tama po?
Senator.
Okay, matanong ko tama kasi may follow-up question ko doon kay Mr. Juanesa. So kung may problema po doon kasi hindi po nagsusupervise, meron kayong supervision power over sa mga cooperative. Doon po sa, I hate to do this, pero I have to na lang. Kasi tapos na tayo doon sa Beneco.
Senator?
Sa Beneco. Yung Beneco na walang problema, nalitan nyo yung GM. Ito sa Umeco, pagkatagal-tagal na may problema, pati mga taga-LGU, nakakalata na, hindi niyo pinalitan. Hindi niyo po sinita. Wala ko kayong ginawa na para imbestigahan at tingnan ano po makakatulong ang ERC. I'm sorry, ang NEA. Go ahead po, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For purposes of giving everyone a good background as to the process of how the CSP was conducted very recently, I would like to ask your permission, Mr. Chair, to call the project supervisor of Umeco to explain the process. And to answer also your question, Mr. Chair, the National Electrification Administration has intervened already in Umeco. Thereby,
Intervention.
we have a project supervisor, a NEA employee that has
Okay, so, sir, ano klaseng intervention po ang nagawa
we
niyo, sir?
assigned a project supervisor to sort out the problem on management and governance,
Ba't
Mr.
mo
Chair.
pinapalitan yung GM?
Walang GM, sir.
Wala bang GM sa Umeco?
Well, when we
From
started,
NEA po, si Manager
NEA.
Tael doon.
so we have a project,
Meron.
we have a
Nag-action
project
na
supervisor and a GM from NEA, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And he will explain if he will give us the permission.
Go ahead po. Yes, sir.
PS AGM, Cesar Fayaldon, you may express, how, explain properly, how did we conduct the CSP and what have you done, for Umeco since you took the job. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vanessa.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman of the committee, Sir Senator Tulfo, and distinguished members of the committee. Yes, I am a NEA employee, Cesar Fayaldon. I was designated as originally as project supervisor and acting general manager of Umeco in September 2018. So, but now the situation now
Francisco,
is
si Francisco.
the position of general manager is under process. So, project supervisor na lang po ako and mayroon naka-designate na OIC general manager. Kasama ko po dito. So, when I came in, meron na pong problema itong, thank you, Governor and Vice Governor for their presentation na binigyan nila ng history saan nag-umpisa itong problema. And that's correct, na nagkaroon po ng kontrata si Umeco noong 2014 with EPI, Emerging Power Incorporation, kung saan, based doon sa contract, they will deliver the geothermal power 20 megawatts in March 2016. So yun po yung nasa kontrata. So nung dumating po ako dito, ang nagsusupply na po yung OMCPC based on the authority by ERC as transition power supplier, because as mentioned by several speakers earlier, ang OMCPC po is supposed to be the backup standby power supply in the event of authorized outages ng EPI na hindi po nangyari. So in March 2019, I personally visited yung planta ng geothermal sa Nauhan Oriental Mindoro to validate kung talagang meron ba silang planta ng geothermal. So pinuntahan po namin at I'm sorry but dumating kami doon, masukal na po yung lugar. Although mayroon pong evidence na nagdig po sila, but as per doon sa planta, yung caretaker doon, tinigil na po. And that was 2019 na po yan. So from 2016 to 2019, wala na pong galaw yung geothermal. So on that basis, nais ko pong pabulaanan yung sinasabi ng ating isang leader dyan na wala kaming guts sa Umeco. Because on that basis, I initiated the termination of the contract between Umeco and EPI. Hindi po nila na-mention yan eh. Wala pong nag-mention.
Sir,
Sinasabi
okay.
lang-
Sir, sabi mo meron isang leader dyan. Excuse me, sir. Sabi mo, may sinasabi ka, meron isang leader dito na sinasabing wala kayong guts. What are you referring to? Para mapasagot ko po siya.
My apologies, sir. My apologies, sir.
Hindi, pero sino po yun? Pag-refer naman tayo dito. What are you referring to? Yung sabi nyo,
isang leader dito.
I'm sorry, sir.
Para I can get his reaction.
My apologies, sir. Can I
That's okay, sir.
can I continue? Your
Are
Honor?
you referring to the vice governor, to governor? Okay, but go ahead po. Continue, sir.
Yeah. My apology, Governor.
No, go ahead po. So, governor. Okay, governor is asking for your phone.
JM, mambayabagay ko po yung sa OMCPC to the API. Yung nangyayari sa atin ngayon kasi ay mayroon sa PSA nyo, sa power supply agreement ninyo, ang OMCPC dapat may 15 days na fuel reserve. How come na naubusan sila ng fuel? So, breach of agreement kasi yun. 2 days, how many hours na brownout tayo dyan? Total blackout. Shutdown talaga yung OMCPC dahil walang fuel. So, pwedeng ground yan para i-terminate natin yung PSA.
Okay, I would like to recognize Congressman Leody. Congressman Leody, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the honorable members of this committee. So, I think medyo malayo na tayo, no? Pero yung current problem ng Mindoro ngayon, no? Katulad ng diniscuss ni Secretary Lutilla. So, nag-allot tayo ng 5 years for the interconnection of the province of Occidental Mindoro to the national grid. Sinabi rin ni Sir na pinanalunan ng OMCPC yung 3 power supply agreement last January of 2022. So ngayon, in addition to the governor, ang kailangan ng Mindoro ngayon, yung power. Shutdown ng for how many days? Kuminsan 4 na oras na lang ang kuryente. Talagang andalas ng wala nang magawa, wala nang negosyong halos tumatakbo. So ngayon, my question is, bakit yung out of 3 power supply agreement, pinanalunan nung January 2, hanggang ngayon hindi pa tumatakbo yung 2 planta, yung Samarica at yung Mamburao, yung MAPSA. So ngayon, ang ginagamit nila yung 20 megawatt na power plant sa San Jose. So, talagang kung tutusin mo, over-contracted capacity, pero walang power. So yun ang gusto kong linawin ng this honorable committee. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to answer that, Mr. Waneza?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And firstly, the OMECO's current peak demand is 29 megawatts. And the available power supply is only 20. So yes, it is right. We have a deficit of 9 megawatts. Based on that, the recently conducted CSP, the MAPSA, if I may, has a capacity of 7 to 9 megawatts for a contract period of 5 years. Sablayan has 5 to 6 megawatts. So practically, the deficit of 9 megawatts is fully covered. Why it is not running is the question. It's not operating yet. It's not operating yet. The first 2 clusters of the contract awarded to OMCPC, MAPSA, and Sablayan, it's because the COC or Certificate of Compliance of the OMCPC has not been approved yet by ERC because the documentary requirements that should be submitted by OMCPC and UMECO hindi pa kumpleto po. So, kaya sir, hindi pa nakakatakbo yung 2 planta na yon with a capacity of roughly 15 megawatts.
Pero 2 taon na po, sir, hindi pa rin tumatakbo.
Ang question, yes sir.
Ito po yung
Ito yung bago.
Samarica at saka Mambura na sinabi po ni...
MAPSA at saka Sablayan, sir.
Ito po yun? Oh, okay. So, 2 years po na?
Yes, sir.
Hindi pa rin. After na sila po ay nanalo na at na-awarded na po ng contract. So, bakit po 2 years.
Ang
Ano po yung nagkakaproblema doon?
ang problema dito, sir, dahil nga in the usual na sinasabi natin yung pandemic, so there was a delay in the construction and complicated now dahil
So, sabihin sir, nung pandemic, hindi na po kayo nakapagtrabaho. Wala na tayo
Nagtrabaho.
magawa. Okay.
nagtrabaho din, sir.
So, kasi I hate to hear na karamihan ngayon, pag may pagkukulang yung ating mga taga-gobyerno, whether that's government or even sa private, laging ginagamit na dahilan yung pandemic.
If I may,
Kumbaga, pandemic palagi ang mabilis at madaling gawing lusot. So, 2 years pandemic, kaya walang trabaho, kaya hindi po matuloy-tuloy pa rin yung pag-perform po ng dalawang pinag-uusapan natin dito yung sa Marica at saka Mambura. Am I right?
if I may, sir.
Yes, sir.
There was no total stoppage of the work by the contractor and the OMECO. There was a slowdown because of certain issues. But sir, yung ang ano talaga ngayon, ang kailangan na lang talaga namin gawin, kumpletuhin yung documents, isubmit sa sa ERC para maka-operate itong MAPSA at saka sablayan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congressman, would you like to react?
As far as I'm concerned, sir, inalaw na ng ERC na gamitin yung 20 megawatt power plant in San Jose. Bakit still brownout at I think 12 or 14 megawatt capacity lang yung ginagamit? So I think the OMCPC also to answer this question. No?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead po, Secretary.
Senator, one of the shorter-term solutions is that Transco has finished the 69 kV circumferential transmission lines in Mindoro. But it is still undergoing testing, and the testing will end by December, by which time interconnecting the entire island means that you will now have access, Mr. Congressman, not only to the Occidental Mindoro plants, but also to the Oriental Mindoro plants. That's one way of addressing it, but there are not enough reserves. And so the points that you have raised, and we will ask NEA to look into this, is that the additional plants that were authorized by ERC are not supplying power. And so, Administrator Juanesa, I think we need to address that particular issue because this is in violation of their terms and conditions of their competitive selection process. If they want it, then they have an obligation to provide power as pointed out by Congressman Tariela. So it is something that I think NEA with the with our supervising person there should be able to address.
Thank you, Secretary Lutilla. Mr. Juanesa, Administrator Juanesa, you're being recognized. Go ahead po, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. NEA will review the conditions of the terms of reference if with the guidance of the Secretary, if a penalty clause has to be imposed, then we will look into that deeper and implement, Mr. Chair, if we find it warranted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Juanesa. Would you like to add something more? Okay. Okay. Vice Governor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
And, thank you
Congressman
for
John.
this honorable committee.
Vice
And I
Governor,
hope
go ahead.
na mariresolve natin to. At alam nyo, talagang what we need is the short-term solution. We know that we have a long-term solution, no, for this problem. But, talagang kawawa ho yung katulad ng sinabi ng aming mahal na Vice Governor. Kawawa ho yung Occidental Mindoro sa ngayon. Kailangan kahit lang ho yung 20 megawatt na planta ng sa Marica mapatakbo. sa tingin ko, medyo okay na ho tayo. But yung ginagawa nila ngayon, walang diesel, delay ang barko, walang power. So yun ho ang nangyayari. So I hope the OMCPC, you can also contact the OMCPC and study these terms of reference of the competitive selection process na nangyari noong January. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Congressman. Vice Governor, you were
Thank you
recognized.
po, Idol. Thank you. Senator, kung under po ba ng supervision niyo yung aming electric cooperative, ay Secretary Vanessa, kasi sana po, we have to break the monopoly. Nag-iisa yung aming power provider na hindi yung nagbibigay ng maayos na serbisyo. Sana masabihan niyo po yung kooperatiba namin na magpumasok man lang sa ibang power supply agreement. Ang ganda din naman po ng One Mindoro grid. That will be part of the solution. Kaya lang po, kakamiting lang namin yun ng mga leaders ng Oriental Mindoro. Parang kambal ba, Senator, ang tadhana. Pareho ang problema rin po nila, power. Nakakalungkot naman na kung ano lang yung excess nila, yun lang ibibigay nila sa Occidental Mindoro. Kailangan magkaroon din kami ng power supplier na andoon, Senator, kung pwedeng.
Okay.
Paano gagawin natin doon para makapapasok ko ng bagong power provider? Tapos yung penalty po ng OMECO, kung pwede sana mabago ng ERC yung ruling. Kasi inihingi ng OMECO sa amin, Senator, yung 259 million, naka-receive ako ng letter from them asking the provincial government na pahiramin sila ng 259 million due to their negligence. Of course, we cannot do that. Paano yun? Sabi namin, exhaust muna nila yung kanilang legal remedies. O so yun po.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Vice Governor.
Opo.
Okay, Secretary Lutilla, would you like to respond to that, sir?
Mr. Senator, may I ask Transco to respond because they took and clarified to the committee because they were the ones who built the transmission lines. Please.
Go ahead po, Attorney Jainal Abidin Bajin. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Sir, Attorney, you're being recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Rafi Tulfo, Energy Secretary Lutilla, thank you very much. We have been in contact with both Occidental and Oriental Mindoro. As a matter of fact, I think it was just 2 months ago that we went to your province to sign the MOA. We know that ultimately the interconnection to the main grid will provide the permanent solutions to the problems that you're having. But we've already identified the problem as far back as 2020. That's why in 2021, the DOE asked an interagency meeting of all the stakeholders, and we were tasked to study the problem and to look for a solution. Eventually, I'll just repeat, another problem is the frequency of power outages, the high cost of electricity despite the power outages, and the challenges in operational coordination between the stakeholders in the entire power structure. So we develop a system, we call it a SIGSAW. The SIGSAW is by virtue of a DOE department circular, Transco was mandated to help out, especially those small islands that are off-grid. The main solution that we can provide you is fourfold. Do we have the presentation for this?
Yes, sir. We
Opo. Sir, for the function, system control, scheduling, and dispatch. So to be able to explain to you why this is important, to illustrate simply, imagine a highway. Pag marami pong sasakyan, magkakaroon ng congestion. So, yung kotse po, parang kuryente yan. So, pag masyado maraming sasakyan, let's say malaki ang volume na available na kuryente, kung wala pong competent na systems operation for system control and dispatch, magkakaroon din po ng problema kasi magkakaroon ng congestion. Pag naman po kulang ang kuryente, ganun din po. Imagine kung yung EDSA, kukunti ang sasakyan, kasi ang iniiwasan natin dito system collapse. Tapos patayin natin yung control system natin o yung stoplight. Siguro, I'm pretty sure na sa tuloy ng mga sasakyan ng pagtakbo ng sasakyan, magkakaroon ng collapse, magkakaroon ng aksidente. So yun po yung ino-offer ng Transco, kaya pumasok kami, kaya we're undertaking the SIGSO program para ayusin yung system control. Ngayon, yung system control po ba, yung SIGSO po ba, anong klaseng will this be a band-aid solution to the problem? Hindi po. Pero ito po yung pinakamabilis. Hindi naman po mawawala ng brownout, pero mababawasan po yung system collapse at mababawasan po ng kaunti ang brownout.
Okay, may interrupt, Attorney General. Sige, para sa inyo, ano po yung sa ngayon po solusyon sa problema ng brownout? Ano po sa palagay ninyo?
Ito po, Mr. Senator, kasama po sa ino-offer ng Transco is the timely competitive selection process. As a matter of fact, we're already involved in OMECO para humanap ng ibang power producers.
Okay. That has been mentioned by the LGUs.
Opo.
Ni Congressman, ni Vice Governor. So, yung walang kakumpetensya, dapat it should be open for competition.
Yes, sir.
Yung sa power generator dyan.
That is correct, Mr. Senator.
So, bakit wala? Yung po yung tanong nila.
Yes,
If
go.
I may, sir.
Sir, I'd like to introduce you to Professor Wally Del Mundo of the University of the Philippines. He's also with me. He's also with Transco, sir.
Professor Del Mundo, you're being recognized, sir.
Magandang umaga po, Senator and honorable committees. Ang Transco po ay naatasan po ng Department of Energy na tingnan kung ano ho ang dapat na gawin, permanent solution. At dalawa po yung nais kong ibigay na importanteng malalaman din ng lahat. Dalawa po ang pinoproblema natin dito. Number one ho, yung timely availability ng capacity. Yun po actually yung sinasabi nyo kanina. Pero meron po isang dimension na hindi po namin mention na gusto ko rin kailangan i-mention. Despite po na magkakaroon tayo ng available generating capacity, inherent po sa maliliit na power system in the islands dahil po sa gaan nung tinatawag nilang sa gaan po ng system ng mga power plant ay kapo nakakaroon ng kahit kaunting disturbance, magdudulot po yan ng system collapse or island-wide brownout. Kaya po ang aming pong naging proposed solution ay pumasok ang Transco at ilagay po yung tinatawag nating automated system control na hahawak po ng mga power plants.
Okay.
Para po kung magkakaroon ng disturbance, ipiprevent po niya yung system collapse. At kami po ay nagkaroon na ng memorandum agreement. Governor was there as a witness last July po para po maumpisahan na po yung procurement and installation last year po. And this is both for Oriental Mindoro and Occidental Mindoro as well as Palawan po, Senator. So gusto ko lamang pong bigyan din ng diin yun kasi kailangan pong ginagawa din natin kayo immediately ito despite the fact na kung magkakaroon man. Doon po naman sa dahil nga po sa brownout ngayon, ang aking pong mungkahi ay inganyohin po natin ng ERC na kung pwede po ay makapagbigay agad sila ng desisyon doon po sa pangatlong power supply agreement na kung saan ay pinagtatalunan po ng OMCPC at saka ng UMECO kung paano ho ba i-implement. Kasi sa tingin ko po, kung ang ERC po ay makapagbigay ng mandato na anda rin yan at sabihin ng ERC na ito ang provisional price na gagamitin nyo, then tingin ko po magkakaroon na rin ng desisyon ang OMCPC na buhay katulad po nung utos na doon sa dalawang power supply agreement. So immediately kung magawa po ng ERC ay sa tingin ko po masosolve. Now, si Transco po dahil sa utos po ng Department of Energy na aralin namin at mag-provide ng mga solusyon, ay may conclusion na din po kami actually na despite of the concluded CSP in January, ay actually kulang po ang na-procure na power supply. Kaya po kami ngayon ay naghahanda na mag-CSP uli immediately para po mapupunuan ho yung kakulangan. At ang aking pong rekomendasyon dito ay sa dadating na CSP, dahil isa sa na-identify natin probably parang may monopoly, ay explicitly di-disqualify yung existing na supplier in this upcoming bidder.
Okay.
Apo.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Thank you po, Professor. Now, meron ba tayong timetable kung kailan po ma-achieve lahat na ito, mga sinasabi niyo po, sir?
Po. Before the end of this year po, tapos na lahat ng aming dokumento para po maumpisahan before the end of the year ang ating pong CSP. Mamadaliin po namin sa Senator, realizing our concerns now. As this meeting, Senator, has actually taught us that what we're doing in Transco must be double time kami. So, Senator, yun po yung aming gagawin.
Okay. So, you said before the end of the year. So, when can the consumer of Occidental and Rental Mindoro experience no more brownouts?
Considering po, again, yung regulatory process, Senator, isa po sa nakikita din natin na factor ay kung ang ating pong Energy Regulatory Commission ay magbigay ng attention po magbigay po ng mas malaking attention dito sa problema na
So, ibig sabihin, ang ERC ang
tulong po.
may problema rito. Medyo mabagal, hindi masyadong bibigyan ng atensyon. Kasi for me, Prof, kayo po yung mga nasa gobyerno, kayo po nakakaalam, kayo po yung may resources, may budget po kayo from the national government. Kayo po yung mag-usap-usap kung ano yung nakakabubuti para sa mga kooperatiba tulad sa Occidental Mindoro. Hindi na po dapat lang pa magsisihan. Siguro kayo na mag-uusap. Tulad nito ngayon, nakita ko nagsisihan. Ngayon, itinutuloy nyo naman po itong ERC na parang lumilitaw, ERC parang lumilitaw na mabagal. Diba? Then of course, siguro yung ERC hindi natatanggapin yan. So maghuhugas kami. Katama ba ako? Ma'am, maghuhugas kamay po kayo? Siyempre, karapatan nyo po maghuhugas ng kamay. Bakit hindi? Ano po? Kasi kayo po binibron dito na medyo mabagal na po kayo. Ano pong reaksyon, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually po, binibilisan naman po namin. Yung dalawang PSA nga po na final, binigyan na po ng provisional authority, hindi inubos yung oras. Yun pong pangatlong PSA, yung sa Marica, iniintay pa rin po namin yung filing, hindi pa po sila nakafile.
I see.
Hindi pa napafile.
I see.
Oh, man. Oh. Kailan po napafile? Sino sasagot? Hindi pa pala po napafile. Nako, baka pagputi po ng uwak, saka mapapile na ito. Ito po yung sinasabi ko, ladies and gentlemen, po sa mga gobyerno, trabaho niyo po yun na hanapan po ng solusyon ang mga problema kinaharap po ng bayan at ng taong bayan. Kasama po sa mandato ninyo yan. Dapat po nag-uusap-usap po. Nakakahiya po at nakakalungkot na dating po dito, buti naman po meron ganitong klase mga hearing na nagsisisihan po kayo. Dapat po kayo nag-uusap-usap at nagtutulungan para masolve po yung problema sa ating bayan. In this case, yung problema sa Brownout, in this case, sa Occidental Mindoro. First time ko po na makainkwentro na yung mga taong gobyerno na nagtututuruan, nagsisihan, walang gustong magtanggap ng pagkakamali. Lahat ipinapasa sa isa pang ahensya. Okay, I would like to recognize Governor Eduardo Gadiano. May gusto pa po kayong ima-manifest, Governor?
Yes, Sir Chairman. Yung isa lang po ay napagaganda na sinabi ni Professor na kailangan ma-address na ng ARC. Pero sabi nga ng ARC, hindi pa ako nagsasubmit ng wala pang PSA. Anong didesisyonan nila? Wala silang didesisyonan kasi ang OMCBC at saka UMECO, hindi pa nila natapos yung power supply agreement nila. Be submitted sa ARC. Tapos ang isa pong ngayon ay yung pong existing na bagong construct napocor na 10 megawatts. Di ba? Noong August 31 nga nag-testing na at hinihintay na lang na i-accept ng ng Napocor yun, pwede na siyang mag-commercial operation yung sa Napocor na 10 megawatts. Makaka-supplement yun sa power crisis ng Occidental Mindoro sa ngayon po.
Okay. Thank you.
Kung nandito po yung taga Napocor po siguro.
Nandito ba? Napocor?
Attorney Redulma is their chair.
Okay. Attorney from Napocor?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you po.
Attorney Dube? Go ahead po, sir.
Yes, sir.
Recognize po.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we already received the request of the contractor to be allowed to commercially operate. We actually answered them already, Mr. Chair, because our problem with them is that, first of all, we would like to emphasize that NPC should not have been there anymore in the area. They'll privatize na po yung area. We were just there because we were asked to provide additional power. Itong contractor po namin na to, its project was delayed because it should have been started last December. Now, we cannot yet allow them to operate because there are permits that they have to submit, similar to the requirements of ERC. Because if we do not submit these permits, the ERC will not give us the provisional authority to operate, similar to the other problems of the new power providers. And secondly, Mr. Chair, this contract supposedly that should have been implemented long ago was overtaken by some events, like for example, that the ERC ordering OMECO to source its power from ONCPC. So yung instruction na po yun, somehow will give us some concern if NPC will come in again and they will not allow us to recover our cost there. And secondly, we already have problems on fuel allocation, Mr. Chair. And our volume for 2022 fuel is not anymore sufficient because of the spike in fuel prices. We are trying to address this, and this additional fuel requirement from the 10 megawatt will be additional burden again and problem on our fuel requirements. So all this, we're trying to consider it po, and rest assured that once we get clarification on these issues, especially once the contractor will submit the required permits, then perhaps we can have some action that we can raise before our board for approval.
Thank you, Attorney Dube. Governor, are you satisfied? Governor?
At alam ko, government din naman ho kasi yung mga agencies na po yung nag-uusap. Sana mapabilis na lang po yung process kasi talagang yung concern po namin, kawawa ng Occidental Mindoro, talagang hours na lang yata yung power po namin dyan sa Occidental.
And Vice Governor?
Thank you
Be
po.
recognized.
Attorney Ridulme, magandang umaga po. Nakakalungkot naman na mga legal impediments lang po yung nababanggit natin. Kayo po, saan pa po kami tatakbo? Kayo po ang default power provider ng mga bayan na walang matakbuhan. Napocor po kayo. Yung pong 10 megawatts nyo ready for commissioning, actually last Friday iniintay namin. At magiging solusyon sa 36 hours blackout namin. Ang kulang na lang ho yung approval nyo, attorney. Ako nakikiusap. On behalf of my kababayans and constituents, ang mahimbing na tulog, pangarap lang sa amin yan. Sobrang isa sa pinakamainit na lalawigan ng Occidental Mindoro. Tapos wala kaming kuryente, hindi ho nakakatulog ang mga tao, ang mga bata, kaawa-awa. Andun na po yung 10 megawatts, meron po kayong 10 days na fuel na nandun. Tapos wala kaming magiging problema pagdating sa subsidiya. Andun na ho kayo. So yun po, Senator, makikiusap naman ho ako. Sana ma-operate na po ng Napocor yung 10 megawatts nila doon para mabawasan yung aming rotational brownout. Sila naman po yung default power provider eh. Thank you po. Mandato po nila yon.
Thank you, Vice Gov. Would you like to react on that? Attorney Redulme, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Madam Vice Gov, maraming salamat po. Nag-usap po tayo dito noon. Sinabi namin kasi our problem really with that unit that they are trying to come with a commercial operations, yung reliability din po nila. Kasi ang tagal nilang pinaayos po ito. Baka if we allow them, even assuming that we can find a fuel for this, if we allow them to come in, baka hindi rin ganun ka-reliable. But rest assured po, we will provide a solution po once we get the appropriate, yung number one po kasi yung permit talaga eh. Hindi kami makakaano kay ERC. We will be coordinating with the ERC on this if this could be sorted out. And also, ang fuel po rin namin, kulang na rin po kasi sa not only for Mindoro, sa lahat po ng areas that we provide power. So all of these are the concerns that even if we have this supposedly ready capacity, wala rin nung enough fuel to sustain it. Baka sandali lang po, mawawala rin. So we are trying to address din po. Mahirap din po kasi magbigay ng false hope dito sa sa hearing po natin. Sana maintindihan niyo po, Vice Go.
Attorney Redulme, isa sa mga binibigay na dahilan sa mga brownout dahil yung UCME charge ay not enough at hindi na po naibibigay po sa mga electric cooperative. And then recently, meron pong provisionary increase na 2 centavos. Tama? Na ang sinasabi po ng NPC, that should solve the problem of brownouts. So sa tingin niyo po, meron na po yung 2 centavos increase sa rate. Yan po ay enough na wala na pong pag-shoot, wala na po kayo mabibigyan ng dahilan na kesyo lang po yung subsidy, kulang po yung UCME. Hindi na niyo po gamitin dahilan yung kapag ito po 2 centavos po ay gumagana na. Attorney.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Pipilitin po namin na kung mapapatakbo po talaga yung 10 megawatts if yung mga issues na naano namin can be sorted out. Pero we will try our best po para makatulong.
So yung i-charge po, yung sa 2 centavos, di ba? Meron po kayong iningin 2 centavos charge. Magkano ba ang kailangan ng NPC para sa UCME? Billions.
Actually, yung UCME po ay kinokolekta po sa Co-op nationwide. Wala po kaming specific charge per area because we have this SAGR na common rate po na subsidized. Yun lang po sinisingil dito sa area. The rest would be charged sa UCME. And yung UCME po na yan, the difference between yung SAGR na kinokolekta namin sa area at saka yung TCGR ay yun po ang i-allow ni ERC na i-recover naman po ng NPC doon. So wala po kaming specific na additional charge para doon except for the SAGR disallowed by ERC. That is around mga 6 pesos and 39 centavos lang po yun. Average.
Attorney Dulme, natanong ko lang to kanina at parang paulit-ulit na lang po itong katanungan ko. So, para sa inyo po dyan sa NPC, ilan po sa tingin ninyo matitigil na po yung frequent brownout sa Occidental at sa Oriental Mindoro po?
Mr. Chair, kaya po nung sinabi namin, supposedly privatized na po yung area kasi meron na pong new power provider that are responsible for the power supply. Si NPC po, tama po yung sinabi ni Vice Go, default supply na lang ulit kami because of the insufficient supply. Yung po ang hinihingi nilang pagpasok namin na 10 megawatts. Now, definitely that can help augment the power supply there, but in a short term lang po kasi that contract's only for 6 months. And we can ask our board and our stakeholders na kung pwedeng pumasok kami basta may makulang kaming assurance na may fuel pa kami ibibigay doon. Yun lang po ang talagang limitation namin, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Attorney Dulme. So are you satisfied with that answer, Governor, Congressman?
Chairman, may I?
Okay. Secretary Pugo, you've been recognized.
Mr. Senator, in view of the things that we have discussed and in order to sort this out, I'm asking Assistant Secretary Mario Marsigan to get the agencies together
Okay.
so that we can respond. Chairman Dimalanta is also part of the discussions, and therefore we can proceed to solve a number of them. Now,
Thank you.
however, the financial needs of Napocor for this, for missionary electrification. Right now, Mr. Senator, we're just addressing the 1.2 billion that is owed by National Power Corporation to Petron for the fuel. And that's only a partial payment for due for the bills because of the sharp increase in the power. So the universal charge for missionary electrification cannot sustain it even with the 0.02 increase. So this is a difficult time for all of the parties, but we will make sure that there is coordination among the agencies, as your message is clear on that. Thank you.
Napakagandang pakinggan. Thank you po, Secretary Lotilla. Yung mga naman talaga dapat na mag-usap-usap kayo, magkaisa kayo para masolve po natin yung problema ng taong bayan. Wala pong imposible pag lahat ng mga taga-gobyerno, lahat ng mga stakeholders magkaisa para hanapan ng solusyon ang isang problema. Regardless kung gaano kahirap yan po, kayang-kaya po bigyan solusyon pag nagkakaisa po tayong lahat. And I agree with you. Thank you, Secretary Lotilla. Yan po, so far this morning, yan ang pinakamagandang napakinggan ko po. Para sa ating lahat ng mga sinabi rito.
Mr. Chairman, recognize.
After Falomiko is being recognized? Yes. May nagtataas ng kamay sa Omeco. Go ahead po, sir. The gentleman in black jacket and yellow shirt.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead po, sir.
Honor. I-clarify ko lang po yung sa map, yung delay ng operation ng MAPSA na nabanggit kanina. Yung sa Mindoro po na 9 megawatts, meron na pong in-issue si ERC na provisional authority dyan. At as a matter of procedure, nag-conduct na po ng virtual inspection si ERC 2 weeks ago. So ang hinihintay na lang po dyan yung issuance ni ERC ng Certificate of Compliance bago siya mag-operate. So of course, in fairness sa ERC, narinig na namin kanina yung issue nila, but we are reiterating our appeal. Sana po ay mag-issue na po sila ng COC para wala na pong dahilan si OMCPC na hindi sila mag-operate. Because based on the PSA, meron pong provision doon na they are allowed 90 days habang hindi pa kumpleto yung proseso na hindi mag-operate. Ang 90 days po, Your Honor, will be on September 24. So we are really expecting by September 24 mag-operate na po si Mindoro, yung kanilang 9 sa maximum but 6 megawatts muna yon. As far as dun sa sablayan, Your Honor, hindi pa po siya na-inspect ng ERC, although based on the discussion, our discussion with OMCPC yesterday, meron po kaming meeting, ay meron na po silang request kay ERC to conduct the inspection. So again, we are appealing to ERC na sana po ay mabigyan din, although nandiyan na kanina yung appeal ng iba na mabigyan ng konting time, attention ang situation ng Omeco para mag-operate na po yung dalawang planta. As far as yung 20 megawatts po ng Samarica, ayun po yung matagal pa po dahil hindi pa po nakapag-submit ng kompletong papeles ang OMCPC. And we understand because marami pong permitting, particularly yung land conversion nila, requirement doon sa kanilang 7.5 megawatts na solar. So yun po yung kami naman, ang pakiusap naman namin sa OMCPC ay i-fast track po yung pag-follow up, pag-proseso po kasi delayed na po yung pag-proseso ng solar component. So yan po yung situation ng tatlong PSA na somehow delayed na po yung pag-operate. But hopefully with the special consideration and attention of ERC, sana po mapapabilis. Ngayon, meron pong issue na nababanggit na meron pong sinisingil sa amin ng OMCPC na 258 million. This represents doon sa sinasabi nilang penalty namin. Well, we accept nagkaroon ng delay po yung CSP, but sa tingin po namin ay hindi po makaturungan na kami ang magbayad ng subsidy. So nag-appeal na po kami sa ERC, nag-issue na po sila ng clarification kung saan yan po yung nabanggit na nagkaroon ng magkaibang interpretation ang UMECO and OMCPC. But in fairness again to ERC, they committed to us during our meeting a week ago that they will be issuing a clear order as far as doon sa sinasabing 258 million na babayaran po namin. Na yan po yung itinuturo ng OMCPC na dahilan kung bakit po hindi sila nakabayad na makabili ng krudo. So, and then last, Your Honor, is gusto ko rin i-reiterate ang aming appeal again, although mayroon na pong nakadirekta sa kanila, kay Napocor, na sana po ay i-consider din nila na i-fast track yung operation ng 10 megawatts na nakalaan po sa amin. And second is yung payment ng subsidy po, sana po yung standard nila na sinasabi na 3 months processing ang payment ng subsidy, but ngayon nagiging 4 month na based doon sa kanilang sulat sa amin, sana po ay they go beyond the standard at mabigyan po ng special consideration yung situation ng Occidental Mindoro na baka po hindi na po, baka po pwedeng instead of 3 months, baka gawin 2 months or kung pwede 1 month lang ang processing para mabayaran kagad si OMCPC at wala pong dahilan na hindi po sila makabili ng krudo. So in short, Your Honor, the reason why nagkakaroon kami ng 9 hours na power shortage rotational dito is we understand, but yun po yung reason, yung crudo, wala po silang maibili ng crudo nila at delay ang delivery. Although dapat po meron po silang reserve. Yun po yung dapat na ano nila, may reserve po sila. So yun lang po, Your Honor. Thank you very much for this opportunity for UMECO to shed light and to establish the facts. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. At bago tayo magtapos, again, I would like to recognize Attorney Ray Espinosa. Pero since wala naman pong problema sa on-grid at walang problema sa Meralco, so hindi na po namin kayo ma-recognize muna, Mr. Attorney Espinosa. Siguro sa mga susunod na hearing, pwede ko kayo magsalita. Sa ngayon po, I don't see the need na kayo po ay magsasalita dahil wala mo pong problema sa Meralco. Okay, so for the lack of material time, notices and invitations for the next hearing will be sent accordingly. We would like to request that you submit your position papers to the committee. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This hearing is hereby suspended. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Sige po, yung gamit na lang. Tama. Sa inyo naman yan, ate. Oo.